yeah, we'd like to move on to our next speaker of the day, who is Christian Pichler from WWF Austria, who will talk about the white-tailed eagle conservation in Austria. I'd just like to say a few words about Christian before he starts his presentation. Christian has been working at WWF for 15 years now and has been involved with a plethora of conservation projects, for example, on the lynx, the wolf, the bear, the otter, and the beaver. And today he'd like to tell us more about the white-tailed eagle. So the floor is yours, Christian.
Hello, everybody. So yeah, thanks for giving me the possibility to present the white-tailed eagle project, which we started 20 years ago. So as you already heard, I've been working for WWF for 15 years now, and I will talk about the return of the white-tailed eagle to Austria. So I will talk about first a little bit about description, the diet and breeding parameters, and then when the bird was extinct and why it recovers now. Then I will talk about our conservation project and about the current status of the white-tailed eagle and threats, and at the end about conclusions. So the white-tailed eagle is one of the biggest birds of prey. It's the biggest eagle in Europe with a size of 70 to 95 centimeters and a wingspan about 2 meters and longer. So the bird is very heavy, about 4 to 7 kilograms. Yeah, the name, as you can suggest, is because the eagle has a white tail when it's adult. When the bird is younger, they don't have the adult plumage, but the bird is a little bit darker and even the tail is darker. So when the bird is adult, it has a broad wings with a yellow beak he lives about 25 years in captivity. It's possible that it's older, but normally about 25 years, and the habitats are closely associated with water. So he lives on sea coasts, but also on estuaries, floodplains, near fish ponds, and normally in lowland regions. So what do they feed on? Normally they eat on fish, also on birds, and especially in winter on mammals. And then they take carrion. Normally they are not able to hunt hares or other mammals, but they ingest carrion. Breeding parameters are the breeding duration is about 40 days and the nesting period about 80 to 19 days. Clutch size is about on an average 2, and we speak of a vital population when there is 1 juvenile per breeding pair a year. So then it's a really good and increasing population. Yeah, in former times, white-tailed eagles was very widespread in lowland regions in Europe, but because of persecution, habitat loss, and the use of the insecticide DDT, the bird was brought to the brink of extinction. And So it was, there were only a few breeding pairs in Europe left. And in Austria, the last breeding bird was recorded in the 1950s. So then we had only some dispersers coming from other countries and resting here in winter. And the all-time low was in the 70s with 3 wintering eagles. But of course, the high conservation status in the 70s and conservation measures led to a recovery, especially in the northern part of Europe. And that made it possible that white-tailed eagles returned to many countries in Europe. So why did WWF Austria start its conservation program? Because despite decades of full legal protection of raptors, illegal persecution has always continued. And in the 90s, in the 90s there was a sudden rise in cases and incidents due to the appearance of highly efficient poison and baits, and especially large carrion feeding birds of prey were affected. And it was a serious threat to the recovery of the white-tailed eagle to Austria. And that's why WWF Austria started a conservation program 20 years ago. So the goal of the conservation program was to support the natural return of the white-tailed eagle to Austria by first documenting dating the distribution and eliminating illegal poisoning and other cases of persecution as a mortality factor for the white-tailed eagle, but not only for the white-tailed eagle, also for other birds of prey and wildlife in general. So here you can see Austria. The blue parts are the alpine parts of Austria. So we have there another eagle, we have there the golden eagle, and in the lowlands of Austria, in the lowland regions, we have 2 eagle species in Austria. It's the white-tailed eagle and the imperial eagle. So these are in Austria now the habitats where white-tailed eagles can be found. It's the Danube floodplains. It's the border to Czechia and Slovakia. It's the Morava-Daje floodplains. It's a region in Lower Austria where there are many fish ponds, and there are also a lot of forests. So it's the Waldviertel, and a region called Lake Neusiedl, where there are also breeding pairs found now. So it's just the distribution in not only in winter, but all over the year in Austria. So you see in the most of the lowland regions in Austria now we have again white-tailed eagles recorded. And especially in winter, there are many birds found in Austria or can be seen, because in winter, especially the young birds from other countries, from northern countries, they move to Austria and rest and in Austria during winter, and especially the not so experienced birds who are not that good in hunting birds and fish. They have to go to Austria where it's warmer in winter there is not so much ice on the lake, so they can hunt easier fish and waterfalls. And that's why we can find more eagles in winter. And in the last 10 years, we had about 160 to 180 white-tailed eagles in Austria. As I've told you, 20 years ago, the white-tailed eagle was still extinct in Austria. And we had the first breeding attempt in 1999 and the first successful breeding in 2001. So from then on, the breeding pairs increased, and now we have about 35 breeding pairs again in Austria. And every year about 30 to 40 chicks. We did a master thesis 10 years ago where we wanted to see how high or how many breeding pairs could live in future in Austria. So and there the result was that the lower habitat capacity is about 30 breeding pairs, and the upper habitat capacity is about 50 to 60 breeding pairs. So we've already reached the lower limit of habitat capacity, but we think that there is a potential for more breeding pairs in future. So what does WWF do? We do, of course, not only the winter monitoring and the breeding monitoring, we also started with telemetry, because with telemetry you can learn a lot about white-tailed eagles, where they rest, about their home range, where they are in winter, and you can learn, of course, a lot about threats. So what we do is we maintain. We put loggers on young fledglings which are not able to fly. When they are old enough but not able to fly, we climb on the tree, and then we put the eagles in a bag and rope it down, and on the ground we put GSM and GPS loggers on the back of the birds. And then two weeks or 3 weeks later, when they fledge, we get their position, normally every hour. And then we can observe the face of each bird and can see where they are moving around. So especially when they are young, that this migration phase begins, and then they really disperse to other countries. They go, like you can see on the map, to northern parts of Europe, to Belarus, and also to Lithuania and Letland. But we have birds flying to Romania and Hungary. So yeah, they are really moving around thousands of kilometers. And when they reach sexual maturity with 4 or 5 years, they often come back to the place of birth or near the place of birth. With the telemetry, it was possible, but not only with telemetry, also with other means to find out more about causes of death. And we had 61 white-tailed eagles examined, and we know that 1/3 of all white-tailed eagles, which have been examined, die because of illegal persecution. Poison is a big problem, still a big problem, and also shooting or trapping. Then collisions are the second threat, which is very important. Mostly it is collisions with wind turbines, but also with other like trains or cars. Then there we have we have lead ammunition, which causes lead poisoning. We have electrocution. Of course, we have also natural threats like intraspecific competition. Sometimes white-tailed eagles fight, and because of these fights, one eagle dies. And of course, we have other threats and threats which we don't know. So what does WWF do, or did we do in the last 20 years? Regarding persecution, we started a campaign, was called Poison Beware. So there we wanted to document all incidences and have all incidents in a database. We established a reporting system. We have a hotline, we have an app, we have dog units just to find out more about incidents, because normally birds of prey or other incidents are not reported. But if people or target groups are informed, if the reporting system is easy, then we get more and more information on these cases. Then we established a coordination network, and part of the network is the police. It's the criminal investigation police department. It's the local police. It's the Hunters Association in the different Bundesländer in Austria, in the federal states. NGOs are part of this network, national parks, and also the Institute of Wildlife Ecology, which does the surveys and the toxicology. And we have a birds of prey sanctuary if white-tailed eagles or other birds of prey are just injured. And if a poison case is proven, then we do a lot of media work and a lot of awareness raising. Lead poisoning. This happens because Dappling waterfowl ingest lead shot pellets because they are mistaken as seeds or as grits, or birds of prey ingest lead shot pellets and bullet fragments. And because of the low acid of the stomach, they are able to solve this lead in the stomach, and then they are poisoned. The intermediate solution for us was to inform hunters to bury gut piles or remove carcasses in nature, so that birds of prey don't have access to contaminated food. But in the long run, we think that the ban of lead ammunition must be the goal. Then collisions, as I said, especially wind turbines are the problem. And there we try to improve the situation by better spatial planning. The solution can be that wind farms are constructed according to a zoning plan, which was done by BirdLife, for example. And this zoning plan takes into account the most important bird migration routes and the important feeding and breeding and sleeping places, so that especially sensitive species are not affected that much. And another solution is to make the rotors more visible. Then we had birds of prey dying because of electrocution. You know that birds sitting on power lines are a familiar sight, but for larger birds of prey, it's a big problem because they can get the electric shock if they touch two lines at the same time with their wings. And the solution is to insulate the conductors of these wires, and then you can prevent such electrocution. In Austria, it's done, but especially in other countries like Czechia or Poland, it still remains a big problem. Then we have also disturbances at nest sites. Many bird species which were exposed to intensive persecutions in the past are very sensitive to the disturbances. For example, when there is done forestry work or hunting. So we try to speak with the landowners, with the hunters, and we try to establish protection zones about the nests, about the, around the surrounding, so that disturbances, especially in the sensitive season when the birds are breeding, prohibited, or forestry work is done at the later phase. Yeah, so I'm at the end of my presentation. What are the conclusions? The lower limit of habitat capacity exceeded. Illegal persecution is still the biggest problem for white-tailed eagles in Austria. We learned that dangers must not be considered individually, but in combination, because there are many threats, and if white-tailed eagles move, especially when they are younger, around in Europe many kilometers, then there are many threats. So we need concepts and we need transboundary cooperation. So the Austrian eagles are, as I said, a part of a meta-population. So that's why transnational conservation measures are necessary. Protected areas are very important, as most of the time they rest in such protected areas. So the Natura 2000 network in Austria, in Europe, is really important for white-tailed eagles. Floodplain landscapes and ponds are also of great importance, and that's why large-scale restoration projects for rivers or for floodplains are very important for these birds. And the conclusion is that around the nest, the area around the nest has to be free of disturbance. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christian, for your insight on the white-tailed eagle in Austria and its comeback in the last 20 years. So we have a few questions for you. First of all, from Hannah Olosh, how successful has the establishment of the hotline been? Do you receive regular calls on this?
Yeah, not a lot. It's always when there is an incident, and we promoted the hotline a lot, then there have been a lot of calls. But of course, people forget about the number and about the hotline, but of course it was very necessary to report incidents and also to report incidents anonymously. So it was of course one part of our conservation measures, but only a small part, of course.
Great, thank you. So we have one more question from Denise about the weight of the GPS trackers. What's the weight of the GPS trackers and how do you attach them to the birds?
It's only 30 grams, so it's less than 1% of the total weight of the bird, because as I said, it's about 5 to 7 kilograms, the bird, and the logger is about 30 grams. So it's 0.5% of the weight of the bird. And it's mounted like, there are two methods. One is a kind of backpack. It's mounted with Teflon tapes around the wings. And the other method is leg loops. It's like panties for babies you're putting on the eagle. Yeah, but both work very well.
Okay, we have another question on the Q&A section from Isaac. Is there a reason why the white-tailed eagle juveniles seem to fly east and south, but not west into countries such as France, Belgium, and the Netherlands?
I think that the Alps are a big problem in Austria. As I said, normally white-tailed eagles prefer lowland regions. They normally move to northeastern parts or southeastern parts of Europe, and maybe the Alps are the problem. But yeah, it can also be that most of our birds which came to Austria were from northeastern parts or Hungary, and that's why they disperse also in these regions again.
Great, thank you for that answer, Kristen.